We're now live. So, okay. The our guests are arriving. Thank you, everyone. Pull up a chair, sit down. We're going to just take about 30 seconds here for people to get comfortable, get yourself something to eat. We got a lot of work to do today. Get yourself in a really good, comfortable position for this because uh, this this may be the most important Rushfield lunch we've ever had. This is the one that will count. So uh, get careful. All right, I think we have a quorum. So we will formally begin. This is the Rushfield Lunch. Every week, I welcome the great artists and thinkers of our day to help me sort of unlock what is going on here. More specifically, what the hell is wrong with everybody, and is this whole world doomed? And I say this is maybe our most important Rushfield lunch because I feel like of all the people I've talked to, nobody knows more about that subject of what the hell is going on here than our guest today. Uh, I'm thrilled to have with me the great Delia Cai. Is if you don't know her, then you haven't been experiencing the modern world. She's an author, a journalist, and perhaps best known for her Substack newsletter. 'Cause I feel like if I say the name of it, I'm going to sound really embarrassing. So can you say the name of it?
I feel embarrassed. It's like, you come up with a name for a project when you're like 22 and you don't realize you're gonna have to say it with a straight face for like the next 10 years, but it's Deez Links.
Very good.
Yeah.
It's a great name. I think I'm not allowed. I think my children would murder me if I said that out loud. Um, which brings me to my goal for this conversation is to sort of have you explain the internet and pop culture in the modern world and your generation and all those things to me, and me to ask about them without sounding like I'm a thousand years old, which I will inevitably fail at. So uh, please
It's
do
okay.
forgive me when I say so. You put the memes on these websites and then the sites go to internet. Uh, but that's about where I'm coming from. What generation do you consider yourself?
I'm a millennial. I'm probably one of like the last cohort of millennials. I'm like a 93 baby. I think the cutoff is 95 for Gen Z. Yeah.
Wait, so Gen Z and then Gen L, but you remain. I feel like you're more of a spokesperson for Gen Z than you or interpreter of Gen Z than you are a millennial. Do you feel like that your spiritual connection is with them?
Yeah, I think so. I think like a lot of the fun that I had when I was at my last job at Vanity Fair was sort of almost this like translation a bit because I think, I kind of came of age on the internet that the millennial sort of like blogging generation and the digital media of like the 2010s really shaped. And so it was sort of like that's kind of what taught me how to like be a person and how to think and what opinions to have. And then so then to see the sea change into as like Gen Z has aged into cultural dominance, I think seeing the difference has been always really interesting to me. And so I do think that like I probably like on paper would say maybe like I know a bit more about Gen Z just because like the contradiction is so clear from sort of like here's what I've known and here's something different. But I do think like in my like heart of hearts, I identify as millennial because like honestly, this whole front facing camera thing, I'm already like sweating. I don't have the I still find it very, like, embarrassing to be on the street, like, taking a selfie, and I've noticed that, like, all my Gen Z friends have it's not even a drop of embarrassment. They're just like, "This is as normal as breathing," and so that's, like, kind of one of my markers of, like, "Oh, yeah, I'm definitely still a millennial. I'm still embarrassed to, like, put myself on the internet."
Interesting. Well, tell me about. I want to hear what was your journey to come to the internet and pop culture. How did you find your way to all? all this? You say you were at Vanity Fair and at
Yeah,
the late end of the blogging era there.
yeah.
How did you find your way to all this?
Um, I grew up always wanting to write. I wrote a lot of fan fiction, a lot of Harry Potter fan fiction
Well,
for this website in like the 2000s called
tell tell
Quizilla.
tell me about your greatest Harry Potter fan. What did you what was the scenario that you concocted?
It was a classic like enemies to lovers. It was like all about Draco Malfoy and this made up character suspiciously seemed a lot like me.
Hmm.
I think it had 70 chapters, but it made it to the, Quizilla. So it's funny because like, you know how Substack has these leaderboards now for newsletters? Quizilla had leaderboards for, like, the best stories every week, and so it was, like, most viewed, top rated, and so, like, all of my middle school and high school life was spent, like, trying to figure out how to get on those leaderboards, how to stay there. That was my whole childhood. So I think in a way I was like I really came of age kind of trying to like, make stuff on the internet and make it do
And
well, you know?
gaming those leaderboards. That's a
Yeah.
did you crack like what is the key to so climbing the Harry Potter fan fiction board or
I think n I feel like, not to toot my own horn, but I do think that, like, the level of writing was overall like, it was a website of middle school girls like me, you know? And so I think I was just, like, putting in, like, hours every night working on it because I was
did the
just
middle school girls want to hear about Malfoy the most? Is that
yeah.
what
Yeah,
that
because he was he was, like, the bad boy.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So, yeah, so
So
that's kinda how I got started, and I think it was, like, the consistency of, like, writing a new chapter every week, and so, yeah, I was, like then I learned all these principles of, like, be consistent, like, develop, like, a voice, interact with your readers, like, I was always messaging people back, network with other writers on the website. Um, it was kind of yeah, it was kind of the best time. But the really sad thing is that, like, because we all used, like, usernames, I have no idea where those people are, after
that,
the
that
website got shut down.
that is amazing. Is there any
Mm.
is there do those archives still exist? Is there any
I don't think so.
way of tracking them down?
I think I don't even know if I have the files because I remember I wrote my mom gave me a laptop, and so I was working on those, and I took a lot of screenshots, I remember, especially, like, on the leaderboards, and I don't know where even that laptop is. So I think it's all lost, which feels
Yeah.
really, really sad, but I think it's kind of how it goes.
There. Uh, so, how did you make the? How did you go pro after youth in the fan fiction world?
So I went to the University of Missouri for the journalism school.
Hmm.
Um, they had a really great program where they were sort of like, we'll put you in it wasn't even like one journalism degree. It was sort of like you go into the journalism school and then you pick from like broadcast news, magazine journalism, newspaper journalism, something called strategic communication.
And
And so I just remember being really impressed by that. And I was like, this J school seems very like professional.
was
Um,
this still in the day where it's like you go work at a local newspaper and
yeah,
you start on the city desk and you work your way up and then you go to a
yeah.
slightly bigger paper and
That was I think the whole crux of the school. They wanted you to sort of start reporting in some capacity almost immediately. And then I think when you're a junior or senior, you literally get placed in either like the city television station, the city newspaper, or like the city newspaper's magazine supplement. So it was like you were basically like working by the time you were 20.
there was a sense
Um,
that this was an actual career ladder that people could enter
yeah,
and have a life and a career on it.
yeah. I think there were like, no one sort of had any illusions that it was, like, the path to making, like, a lot of money, but I think, like, all of the, I remember, like, all my professors, they had experience working at newspapers in, like, St. Louis and Kansas City. It was a really big deal when there was a senior I knew who got an internship at Harper's Bazaar in New York because that just seemed like a different planet. Um, but even then, I think, like, all the magazine people I knew had these like very big aspirations. A lot of newspaper people I knew were, they were like ready for the life. They wanted to work for a local paper. And we were sort of
Did,
taught that was like the noblest path you could take.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Which the newspaper people will still tell you it's the noblest path
Yeah.
available to humanity. But so you were a magazine person then, or
No, so the funny thing is that at the same time there was like a campus newspaper that was entirely student run, and I got really involved with that and then realized like I didn't want to sort of like balance both the the sort of city newspaper curriculum with my extracurricular on this student paper. So I did this strategic communication emphasis. So I took all these classes in like advertising, PR, marketing, which, like, I kind of think ended up being really helpful for I mean, I'm sure we'll get to this later, but, like, the state of media now, which is sort of, like, so much of it is a marketing exercise. And so I kind of mistakenly it felt a bit like a slacker because it was not noble to go into Stratcom, but I really loved the school paper. It's called the Maneater. I loved, like, working on it and sort of running it without any, like, adults in the room, and so I was like, "I wanna stay with this, so I'll just take these classes and get my degree." So I never actually worked for the city paper as a res
so?
yeah.
So how did you find your way to New York media then and the magazine world, and how did you fall into this role, which I read your Vanity Fair pieces at the time, and again, sort of the interpreter of what's happening in the internet and pop culture uh, for media people who like myself might not understand any of that.
Yeah. Uh Okay, so I graduated, and right out of college, I got a position. I got like Atlantic Media, which owns the Atlantic, as well as like I think like Courts at the time, National Journal. They had a fellowship program for basically an internship program for post grads, and, I got one of the fellowships, moved to DC. I was part of a class of, I think, like 40 or 50 just recent grads, and we were placed around the company. And so I was not with, like, the Atlantic per se. I was under, this tiny little, like, department called, Chairman's Lab, which was, really, like, a really, like, highfalutin name. It was
Wow.
I basically was, like, working
It just
on
it
strategy.
sounds like you'd be figuring out how to give the owner like eternal life and like
I know,
make
it
his
sounds a
dogs
little
clone his
yeah.
dogs or something. Or the
Yeah, it was like it seemed almost like I was just, like, David Bradley's, yeah, minion. It was I remember, like, they've rebranded that now, it's, like, the strategy research department, but, like, I don't know, when you're 22, you don't know what that means at all, you have no idea what you're really doing. But I remember that job was basically like, just read a bunch of news about the media industry, write a newsletter that for like internal uses to sort of just keep everyone abreast of like this thing called ad blocker is happening and here's what it might mean for the company. It was just like a basic trends report
mm,
just for within Atlantic Media. Um, so I was in that fellowship for a year. When it ended, I there was an opening on the Atlantic's marketing team in New York, and so I think because I was a fellow, I sort of got fast tracked into that, moved to New York, and was on the branded content team essentially at the Atlantic. And I did that for a couple of years, and then I worked for at BuzzFeed for a few years. And during
what were you doing at BuzzFeed?
I was like, it was also super random. Like I joined the international team. I like applied to so many jobs there because this was really, I think, like the heyday of like everyone wanted to work at BuzzFeed.
Yeah,
Um,
I was there briefly too.
oh really?
When I was there, it was fairly early on,
Yeah.
and I said to someone, one of the heads of it, I mentioned, I said, well, as the oldest person who works here, and she said, oh yeah, and I said, no, that was a joke. I'm not the old, and she said, no, you are
Yeah.
actually. I
Oh
was the
my
oldest,
god.
so I was the oldest person at BuzzFeed, but you were.
Wow.
That
No,
that was
I mean,
a
at
horrible
that point
moment in the journey of Gen X.
yeah.
But
Wait, were you, like, on news with, like, Ben Smith or sort of like BuzzFeed, like, .com as they would call it?
Yes, with Ben Smith, I
Yeah.
opened the Hollywood bureau and
Okay.
had a short time there.
Yeah.
Uh, wasn't a fit, as they say.
Yeah.
But what did you cover? You were in the international desk there.
I was on the international desk. I was literally, like we wanted to just put as much content on the .com site as possible, and we had all of these international offices, and so someone had this idea of, like, well, instead of just, like, making more English language, like, American, quizzes and lists, let's just, like, translate basically, like, run, a lot of this international content through a translation service, and then we'll just, like, lightly edit for, like, cultural differences, and so I was basically just kind of, like, cleaning up and editing these, like, this translated content to put on that we would just have more to put on the website, and it's kind of crazy because I feel like media companies learn this lesson a lot where it's like the idea that, like, all these international offices, you can just flip a switch and things can kind of, you know, literally be translated back and forth, and I think what we learned from that experiment was that, like, oh, it's actually a lot more work and things don't really translate culturally, like a list that does really well on BuzzFeed Japan just doesn't really pop off on, like, BuzzFeed US.
Hmm.
But it was interesting, and
But
after yeah,
it was
what was it?
also, I mean, one of the craziest rises and then declines of very rapid on both sides of that
Yeah,
of a media. I mean, there was a time it rivaled. It must have been, one of the five biggest newsrooms
yeah,
in America that at some point, and then a couple of years after that, it was all but gone. So
mhm,
what did
mhm.
that rise and fall? What did that you understood? Did you learn about the mortality of a media company early on there, and what did that mean?
Yeah. I mean, I remember, like, so after the international team, I ended up moving on to, like, the audience development team, and really that team, like, we were sort of just beset every day with the, like, challenge of, like, how do we wring more traffic out of, like, the content we're making, and all we could ever really, like, think of was sort of devising these, like, sprints where, people would be rewarded for producing X many more quizzes or X many more lists, but, like, there was only so many times you could do that, but it was because, every few weeks we would see a dip in traffic, we'd have to kind of figure out where it came from. So often it was Facebook, and I think it was just this feeling of, like, we're not actually really in control of this at all. Like, we built this entire, business on this, gold rush of social traffic, and now we're realizing that actually they'll change the levers at any point. They won't tell us when or how, and we are gonna have to try to figure out every time how to make up for it. And
That was
it felt
that was
yeah,
that was the hinge point of the famed pivot to video.
absolutely. Yeah.
Was right there. How so? Skipping ahead a little bit because we have so many
Mhm.
to cover. How did these link? I'm trying to find those links. Your newsletter.
Yeah.
How did starting that? How did that come about?
So I started that when I was at my internship at the fellowship in DC, because I was, like, really bored,
Mm,
and I was really jealous of the other fellows who were, like, on the Atlantic side, and they were actually doing what I thought was, like, real editorial work. They were fact checking, they were blogging, and I was like, I'm just writing, like, corporate memos and this, like, internal newsletter, and, like, I need more attention than this. And so I just started on Tiny Letter because this was also around, like, there were already, some really wonderful newsletters that I was reading as part of my job, like Anne Friedman's newsletter, Rusty Foster's Today in Tabs, and so I was already kinda like, I really like this medium. It's a lot like it feels like reading blogs. but with a little bit less work. And I was like, oh, I'll start one on Tiny Letter, and it'll just be something funny that I send to my friends every day because I'm sitting in this cubicle, kind of just bored 8 hours a day anyway. And so I just sort of made it almost a bit of like an exercise for myself where I was like, every day I'm going to find one link that I think is interesting, form some kind of like opinion or write about why I think it's interesting, and just send it to my friends. And I just kind of kept that up through the years, like through moving to New York. I had it while I was at BuzzFeed. And it wasn't until I guess like 2021 when Vanity Fair reached out to me, because at that point it had just grown into like, it was a blog, but it was also, I kind of learned how to develop a voice and was taking on like sort of like a call. It looked like a column. I was doing interviews. I was doing a little bit of like kind of baby media analysis, because I think what I realized was like once you're sort of around media for even like 2, 3 years, you notice a lot of patterns. You kind of know how to form an opinion about things. And so I was really just sort of like trying it out in real time. And then in 2021, which was like 5 years later, Matt Lynch from Vanity Fair reached out to me, and he was like, like you've sort of expanded this newsletter, outside of just cool things I see online to sort of like, the nature of how online culture has developed and what are the big players and what are the most interesting stories. And so he was sort of like, why don't you just come to, Vanity Fair, and you could sort of be this sort of columnist slash like translator in a way, and sort of just do it under a staff title. And I think I kind of that's what I had been building the newsletter for. I think it was always this like I always saw it as like a rolling job application, because I just didn't think I would ever get just like a regular staff job. Um, at the entry level, because I felt like honestly like I kind of missed that. Like my friends all did it right out of college, and I kept finding myself in these like funny media jobs that weren't really like a staff writer position. It was like audience development or like this international BuzzFeed thing or like branded content. So I just felt very adjacent to it.
So the thing I love about your newsletter, always love it about it. It interprets it's for old people like me. It interprets and sort of explains the internet, but you do it from this point of view of like amusement for someone like
Mhm.
me who I dive into the internet with sort of terror and disgust. I think are
Mhm.
what I feel like, and self hatred whenever I open my browser. You make it very. You have points of views, and you have positions, and you call out things that are good or bad, but it never it's more a position of bemusement
Mm.
than anger. So many of these things seem written from the perspective of anger and all that. Is that how you feel about um, all these this whole crazy world of social media and pop culture and everything you interpret? Or
I think so. I've kind of never been told that, but I sort of feel very glad that that is the impression that I give off. I think that probably just comes from like, I grew up in like central Illinois with two engineer parents who were immigrants who, it was kind of the farthest from the centers of culture that you could go. And so I think to kind of wind up, in media in New York, it is just sort of, it feels like, I've just kind of gotten to sneak into the party, and it is all, not that it's like all low stakes, but it is like, this is not the stuff my parents were concerned about. And I think it is not that it's like frivolous, but I do think that it's so funny, because I do think it's at the end of the day, it's impossible to explain any of this to, my parents, or I think people who have like, I don't know, maybe like jobs that more directly contribute to like society in terms of like linemen, or, like servers at the restaurant, where it's like societally, as a society, we really need these people. And then I think just like making stuff online, it's like, oh, we're making this kind of like invisible stuff for the invisible like air, but like it means so much to us. And I guess I find that very funny and charming.
when you were when you were diving into this world and did you live in Brooklyn?
Yes.
And you live in Brooklyn. You're going to
Yeah.
parties with these exalted bloggers and all these people with their credentials and their Ivy League diplomas and everything. Did you feel a snobbery about the Midwest, and how did you deal with that and get through that?
Yeah, I remember, like, the fellowship program at the Atlantic Media was I kinda struggled with it for a few months because there were I'd never met so many Ivy League kids in my
Yeah.
life, and I never met people who came from wealthy families, and, everyone just seemed eons ahead because they had grown up reading the New York Times in their, living room with their parents, whereas I felt like I was just catching on to what some of, like, the really basic stuff was. Um but then I think I realized that, like, no one else at that job was paid to just sit around and read all this stuff, so I felt kind of like I was, like, catching up and then sort of surpassing them. Because then I would say, like, "Did you see that Digiday article?" And because they were busy doing other stuff, they'd be like, "No." And so then I could kind of be like, "Well, here's something I know that you don't know." But then it also just happened that, like, I started befriending a lot of these other fellows, and some of us are still, like, friends to this day, and then that was kind of like, "Oh, okay, like, you don't think you're better than me. We're actually all just kind of confused about the stage of life and why we're spending our time, like, opening mail and watering plants, and no one has it figured out." And that was very, I think, wonderful to realize in that way, and I think that helped us all become very close.
And the great breakthroughs and the great accomplishments will always come from outside of that bubble. There will never
Yeah.
be people who came to that. By the way, I should mention this half an hour ago, but to all our guests and who are joining us here, if you have questions, comments, concerns, um, please write them at the bottom. We love to. This is your lunch too. Love to share it. And Mindy asked a very pertinent question. What is your topic today? What are you writing about today in the newsletter?
Oh, I need to write one today. Well, the
What's next? What's last or next on your lineup?
the thing a lot of people have been talking about in at least my circles this week is Gia Tolentino posted a post on Instagram about a sort of sponsored collaboration she's doing with Airbnb, and people have a lot of feelings about that because I think she's sort of the most looked at writer of the millennial generation, and I think she's such, like, an important voice, for us, and so I think this is the first time she's really she said in her post, she's like, I'm breaking my personal, like, my rigid SponCon ban." And so I think this is, like, a kind of a big moment for just the arc of, like, journalist, writer into being some kind of cultural influencer who will partner with a brand. And I think people have a lot of feelings about that. So I think I'm still I'm
Have
trying to
you?
unpack my feelings about that too.
Yeah,
But
you haven't come down in your position. I mean,
sorry?
you. So in my day, when I started uh, when old media was something, there's a rule like if you ever work for a brand, if you ever do
Mhm.
anything for a brand, you are disqualified from
Yeah.
writing. Not just
Yeah.
writing about that, you are disqualified from writing for
Just yeah.
legitimate newspapers forever.
Yeah.
Like and that I think that's gone by the wayside. We can safely
I think so
say.
too. Yeah.
Um, and there's a few. You have another one today that yesterday about Caitlin Tiffany's
Oh, yeah.
from Atlantic tweet about can you explain that to me? Explain that probably
Yeah.
better than I can here.
So Kaylin Tiffany, a writer at The Atlantic, who I love reading her stuff, she
She wrote a great book, by the way, also
yes.
about the about fandom and the internet. So
Yeah.
everyone
Yeah,
should read it.
she's great. I feel like she also just, like, understands the internet really well, so I was really surprised that she kind of found herself that she wound up at the center of this just, like, kind of shitstorm on Twitter because she tweeted a screenshot of a job listing at N+1 for a managing editor position, and the salary band was they wrote it out, it was, like, between 58 and I think, like, 60K, maybe a little more, but it was around that range, And
for
she
extremely senior position.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
to basically be second in command. And she tweeted it and was just like, I think she said something around like just like, "LOL, this is such a joke." And it was really interesting because I think I've seen like a million tweets like that. Like I'm sure I've made a million tweets like that. Like I think in media, it's sort of a tradition to make fun of kind of like how ridiculous the salaries can be, and the compensation is. But I was really surprised because there's a just huge backlash to her where they were sort of saying like, 60K is nothing to sniff at, which is true. Um,
But if you
but it
have,
just sort of
if it that's a position for someone with probably 10 years plus experience.
yeah. Yeah.
So in their late 30s and up, uh,
Yeah.
possibly with a family living in the most expensive city in America.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
$55,000 doesn't gets you through like an afternoon in that city. I have
Yeah.
been there, but
Yeah.
um,
I was kind of surprised there was so much backlash about it, but it's
so
interesting.
well, both of these stories sort of point out to me that it, this is really like not a sustainable profession for being like that there's these arguments about numbers that have now become so low and so small. I think that endorsement one you mentioned, that she she's charging something like, what was it? It was like $75 or something.
I
Or-
think that the tickets were 65. Yeah.
So it's like 65. Like these are not like, people are not taking like, millions of dollars of cash or
No.
stock credits here, and
Yeah.
it's so it seems like you're having a real fight at the bottom, as like it's
Yeah.
become like a kind of Hunger Games here.
Yeah.
What do you
I think it's
feel about this?
especially I think, like, I was talking to a bunch of friends about this, where we're like, if it was anyone who was sort of, like, not, like, a star New Yorker writer with a best-selling book, I don't think any of us would blink. I think, we would sort of be like, good for this person," because who amongst us is saying no to, like, a little newsletter sponsorship here or, a little sponsored Instagram post. But I think I almost feel like it feels like we're all very disillusioned to think that, like, if Gia Tolentino, one of, like, the greatest, most well-known writers of our generation is doing this, it's not good. Like, things are not good, Like, 'cause yeah, I also agree that it's like, it didn't seem like this was some kind of, like, multi-million dollar deal, I would assume. I don't know, but,
I mean,
um,
$65 a pop. It's not like
no, no,
you've got
yeah,
to sell a lot of $65 to get to something that's huge. Yeah.
mhm.
So what do you tell people when they're coming into this business? Like uh, how do they move to New York and support themselves and do this? Is this still a profession, or is it becoming a hobby for most of them?
I know, I do feel like the people I really admire now in the industry are the ones who have, like, a very stable day job that, makes them feel useful, makes them feel appreciated, but it's not necessarily a staff writer, full-time, like, media job, and then they get to work on their freelance assignments outside of their job. But I think that is very hard to do starting off the bat. It's like, because when you start, you need to like, or like if you want to, freelance and write about the things you actually really want to write about, you need to have those connections and those like relationships. And so I think that's very hard to start with. But I see a lot of like mid-career journalists who are like, yeah, like I work in consulting, I work in PR, or, I just have like this very nice office job at a marketing company. And then they write 2 or 3, like, millennials are sort of told, like, "Pursue your passion. If you're not doing it full time, then you're not successful." And now I'm kind of like, "No, I think, like, you separate your job from your art, and you are probably gonna be much happier that way if, your art is not what pays the rent," you know? If it ends up doing it, great, but, I think otherwise it's very tough. So yeah, I feel like the advice I give to people starting out who wanna break in now is sort of like, you don't need to have, like, a full-time job in media to reap the benefits. You do have to put in so much more work, I think, meeting people and cultivating relationships, but, like, I feel like I used to aspire to nothing beyond just, staff writer, staff editor, and now it's
Yeah.
like, those jobs are very, very people who have those jobs, they're totally overworked. It's not as glamorous as it seems, um, and it's kinda not worth it, you know? It's like you write 2 or 3 great things, people will know who you are, and they'll keep track of you for years to come. You don't need to write something crazy good every week, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and then and at those jobs, at a big institution, you have very little ability to shape what your reputation will be, what will come of that. You're put
Yeah.
on different things, and uh, what comes out. I want to ask you some for your theory of Gen Z and Gen Alpha here. I again I face them with great concern and I wouldn't say optimism, but I appreciate their energy on some level, and their energy terrifies me on other levels.
Me
We're
too.
there. It seems like, and you capture this in your newsletter. We're really torn between, we've seen lots of examples of their fragility and how they have difficulty facing obstacles and challenges. I think you wrote a piece. You wrote a piece where you called them or was this referring to millennial, the most rejected generation in history? Was that
Oh, yeah. That was Gen Z, yeah.
what the so they've been turned down for jobs. They've been turned on the apps. They have been turned down. They are turned down every day for more romantic connections than people of my generation were in their entire lives.
Mhm,
And they face this constant rejection that uh, generates a sort of fear of engaging. But the other side of it is that you look at their home on social media, and it's dominated by rage and anger and people roaming the landscape looking for someone to yell at, and
mhm.
well, it's how do you explain those two threads, and who are these people, these zoomers?
So, that article, like, Gen Z is the most rejected generation ever, the idea for that came from my editor, Zach at Business Insider, and we worked on the story together for a long time because he was sort of the one who was like, "I just think, the quantity is different because life is just, you can apply to something on LinkedIn in a snap." And so technically, that wasn't available to so many generations and, you can now be rejected 1,000 times, you know? And I was really curious to kind of, yeah, find out, what does this do to a person? What does this do to, a generation at large? And I talked to a lot of, psychologists and therapists, and, a lot of them are saying that, the end result is that you see that Gen Z is just kind of like, LOL, who cares about everything? Because to really put yourself on the line over and over, you can't do that and then sort of recover from 1,000 rejections in the job hunting process without protecting yourself a little. And the same with I think online dating, where it was like you cannot put your heart on the line with every single message, or it's gonna be a pretty miserable life. And so I think it's on one hand, so I think we're talking a lot about do you think this makes them more resilient? Because, there is one sort of direction this could go where it's like, oh, if you just sort of find that rejection is normal, maybe that sort of empowers you a bit and it doesn't hit as hard, But I think I remember I talked to I don't know, it was just I talked to enough people who were sort of like, I don't think that's what's happening. It's more so that the more the more rejection or even just the greater chance of future rejection, the more people are kind of, forming a shell around themselves. They don't really wanna try as hard. They're not gonna, put in the effort on that first date if they just don't know it's gonna go well, and as a result, everyone else, it's, kind of pinballs around everyone in the generation. It's like, "If you're not gonna try, I'm not gonna try." And then I think that, as a result, everyone is sort of, very brittle in this way. I feel like now I feel kind of like someone complaining about, like, the kids are all snowflakes, but I do think that there's this real risk aversion, and, and I think there's this it must feel very, like, hollow and strange to kind of really train yourself to not care about things, but I do think that, like, online, the possibility of being outraged, of especially being morally outraged, that is sort of a form of caring that is kind of my theory is that, like, that's kind of safe. You're not really putting yourself out there by saying, like, you know, like, that's not how people should act on a public bus. But that is something that kind of like that's sort of like a genuine, at least, like, emotion, and you can kind of be worked up about that. You don't That's like one chance where it's like, you don't have to be nihilist about it. You can sort of be like, this is wrong behavior, and I don't think people should do this. And that's so I sort of wonder if, like, that's where a lot of, like, the emotion and sort of, like, caring comes out, is sort of through this, like, judgment and this outrage, because those are, like, safe forms in a way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's do you with those people the constant onlineness you see them on both sides online and
Mhm.
offline, um, and I think we all know people who are very chatty and vocal and great personalities on online and very expressive, and then you see them on offline and you can't get two words out of them and they just seem
Mhm.
very that's a phenomenon I've encountered a lot that super users online often are kind of like a block of wood in real life.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think
the
it's funny.
do you think on a generational scale how does the amount of their life that they live online uh, affect the Gen Z and Gen Alpha? Like, are they less able to interact and survive in this world, or
Um, I feel like I can only theorize on this, but I have a little brother who's Gen Z, and, I do think he grew up in a much more, like, risk-averse way than I did, and I think even as a young adult, he's sort of very, very careful. I almost feel like there's just more of this sense of precarity of just, like, at any point, your life could be ruined or things could be lost or, like, you could be canceled. I think, like, there's really a fear of if you conduct yourself wrongly, you know, in real life, you're very, very aware of, like, I think just the consequences of, like, if I go up to this woman at a bar and I talk to her and I don't do my best work and she takes it the wrong way, and, I could be viral tomorrow, for sort of not knowing how to approach a woman at a bar. And so I do think that, like, the more time I would assume, the more time you spend online seeing kind of like how people are sort of shamed and kind of policed in this way, I would sort of theorize that, like, as a result, in real life, you are very careful. It's like I think we talked about this a lot when I was, sort of like a teen, where it was like, because everyone has, like, an iPhone and, like, a camera, like, spring break is not what it used to be, and I almost feel like that effect has probably only gotten bigger, especially for, like, young people today.
do you think, given all this, here's a thought exercise for you. Um, Given all this, from the internet, a lot of good things have come. We get stuff delivered to us really quick, and instead of having to go to stores,
Mhm.
medical advances, what have you. It opened up when you were living along in a larger world to you, and all that. Um, on the flip side, there is the loss of democracy, the middle class, teen depression, and genocide, and that was another thing. Uh,
Mhm.
if you could press a button, would you uninvent the internet?
Oh, I don't know. I don't you know, I don't think so, because at the end of the day, I think of, like, growing up and sort of just really feeling like I don't know, like, life outside of this little town in Illinois has got to be more lively and has got to be full of more people I can connect with, and there's just there's just gotta be more than this. And the internet was, like, a critical, I think, reason why I think I just didn't, like, totally give up hope, sort of sitting in my parents' computer room by myself, you know? But, yeah, I don't know, I think that is, like, the great scam is that we were told we were going to all be more connected, but then it turns out that, like, we ended up participating as, like, hamsters for all these various corporations who wanna test stuff out and decide how society should be. So I don't think no, I think overall the internet was still good, but I think we really didn't understand maybe that, like, we have this new wonderful thing and all of the corporations and all of the like, the and just I think of, like, the internet as, like, such a distinctly American kind of invention and sort of, like, ethos because it is just, like, wherever you go, everyone's just trying to make a buck off of you, and but then there's still this, like
You had a great
yeah.
term the other day. Ambient shopping is what
Yeah,
we.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, that was a great description of the world we live in now.
Yeah, I honestly I think I picked that up from Terry Nguyen. She wrote this great thing for Vox, like, years ago where she was just like, "The internet is just we live just in ambient shopping, like, everything is in service of, like, buy this thing, or, I'll tell you or, like, you know, I'll tell you this thing to buy later, or you can go here, and that's good for buying things," and that's what the internet is now. But I think the original, like, "Let's connect everyone," I don't know. I don't think I would ever hit undo on that, as
Interesting.
misguided as it was.
No, I mean the things it gives us are real and substantial.
Yeah.
So, uh, you know, maybe what we'll work on together is a time machine where we can go back to when they invented the internet and say, well, we'll have internet, but let's just have a couple little things here be different, like
Mhm.
maybe no anonymous yelling at people or something like that.
Right.
I want to hit you, and this is a chance to sort of explain what these platforms mean to you. So I'm going to offer you. I want you to pick the F, marry, and kill for
Okay,
Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat.
okay. Um, I would F TikTok because honestly, it's really fun, but it does feel like coming off like a drug every time I put it down, you know? Um, I haven't used Snapchat in ages, so I would that's easy to kill.
Mm,
And then I would marry
mm,
Instagram because I think
mm.
unfortunately it's not just entertaining, but it is, I think, genuinely useful for like it's like a bit of an address book. It's a bit of like it's sort of like a literal, like, social leaderboard to see, like, who's got the power, who's doing things, who's yeah, just sort of like who's got the power, and I think that is a very useful, I think, to look at, especially, I don't know, as, like, a freelancer or just, like, a writer in terms of, like, seeing who's commanding the attention right now and how are they doing it. That's unfortunately endlessly interesting to me even as I, spend hours on it every day.
Very good. I hope you and Instagram will be very happy together. Good trip. But I want to ask you the same one for Twitter, Blue Sky, and Threads.
Oh, okay. I'm writing this down. I feel like I know what I should say, but the real, like, truth of it is that, like, I don't use Blue Sky at all, so I would kill that. Probably
Why did you not join the bandwagon and migrate over to and move your life over to Blue Sky?
I did, and then I think I just, like, forgot my password, and then for, like, months, I was sort of just like, I don't know," and I just don't wanna go through this process of, like, it's figuring it out, and I just there was, like, no point in any of my group chats being like, "Dude, did you see this crazy thing on Blue Sky?" So I never felt like anything was actually urgently needing my attention on there. Um, I don't know. I think I wrote something for Vanity Fair when Twitter first got bought by Elon, where I was like, "Maybe it's finally time to get off Twitter." But I think we're in it for life. I think I will be on it until the end because it somehow just continues to fire all the right neurons for me, and
So that
it's
means
like
that that's your sort of dysfunctional marriage.
yes, yeah,
Marriage is what.
very
Okay.
dysfunctional marriage. And then I guess like F threads. Mostly I find threads like useful and charming every now and then, but sometimes I'm like it's just too long and I don't want to read. Turns out I really don't want to read anything more than like 280 characters.
So that would be a so that would be a hookup, but a dissatisfying hookup.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Um, Here's a question to you for you for about that comes from us in Hollywood that I hope you can explain. So there seems to be a sentiment, and I know some researchers say will feel the evidence is strongly in that Gen Alpha will go to movies, that they haven't just written off movies, they will do it, but they have to have the right thing for it. And the right
Mhm.
thing can be like there was that Sydney Sweeney comedy where there was a song in it and everybody just imitated the
Oh yeah,
song doing and
yeah.
so you have a song like do you know the nice catch cheer meme?
No.
Okay, there was a movie on Tubi called Sidelined. I
Okay.
can't believe I get to explain a meme to you.
Yeah.
This is I've dreamed of this for years. Uh, on Tubi, there was a movie called Sidelined about a high school football player, and there's it has it stars sort of minor influencers, not giant influencers, but they're on the influencer ladder.
Okay.
And in the there's a moment in it where the football player throws something and misses whatever he's throwing at, and the
Mhm.
cheerleader catches it, and he says to her,
Oh.
"Nice catch, cheer," and
Yeah.
very adeptly throws it back to him and says, "Not my name, quarterback." And if you go on the internet and search "nice chat cheer," you will see a zillion people uh, reenacting this, and
Okay.
that movie became this enormous sensation for Tubi. They just released a sequel to it, just came out,
Yeah.
Sidelined, it's called. So
Wow.
it, in this little notice movie, there was a random kind of awkward moment that, for some reason, that my children can't explain to me. By the way,
Mhm.
old folks who are watching this, if you say to your children, if you throw them something and say "nice catch, cheer," they will get out a knife and murder you. They will be so angry that you're invading their meme. So I recommend you try that. Um, but how is Hollywood supposed to navigate this? How are they supposed to appeal to these young people who are just looking for random weird things to unite this? That in Minecraft, the chicken jockey line, one line from uh, Jack Black propelled that movie to it's going to be one of the top 5 movies of the year. What are we supposed to do with that? How are we supposed to respond to it?
I think it's almost like, I think of, like, the Minions movie and how it kind of became this, like, huge, like, just group joke to sort of dress up and go see the Minions movie when you were Gen Z or Gen Alpha, whenever it came out. And it was like, this kind of communal thing that they could just take part in together and then make content, which was very important, of their own, of like, we're going to the Minions movie, we're all dressed. I think it was like you dressed in a suit or something. And I don't know, yeah, that stuff I think it's like you can't really reverse engineer it, but you can support it in terms of like I think it would be I'm sure we're headed in this direction, but I think it would be so crazy for people to think like, so first we like come up with a meme and then we reverse engineer the movie. And it's like, no, I think that would be a really crazy way of going about it. But I do think it's like, make your movie and then pay really close attention. Like it's almost like I feel like you need almost like a different kind of screening now where you bring in, specifically the generation who are going to be motivated to make memes and to make content out of this out of like the text, out of the movie. And you sort of like gauge that reaction, and then you pay very close attention to like the internet chatter when it comes out to sort of like, if someone's got a viral tweet off of your movie, bring them to the premiere. Or, if there's like a new group dress up thing and, incentivize that by, then giving them some kind of perk or some kind of meet and greet. But I don't think you should like it's sort of like the politicians when they do internet stuff, and it's like politicians should not be memeing themselves, but they should pay really close attention to who's doing the memeing and recognize like how powerful those people are and invite them on, like, give them an interview, go on Subway Takes. But like don't try to make your own Subway take, if that makes sense. I'm mixing many internet metaphors here, but yeah, like I am sure that like this kind
I
of
have to
like the viral
look
buzz.
when I read you. I have to look up so many things.
Yeah.
but
Oh,
so don't even try to engineer a meme. Like what?
no. I think yeah, don't even try to engineer it, but, like, pay like, where I would put the money if I were, like, the head of a studio is, like, a really amazing, like, social listening team of just, like, pay people to be the ones who are like, "I will figure out, like, what's going viral within minutes, of this movie hitting theaters," and then figure out how to, like, support that. Because I think that's what people really love is, like, when kids and teens, especially when they're making content and then, like, the institution reaches out to them and, even if it's just, like, sending them merch or whatever, but, like, everyone who makes content just wants to be seen and acknowledged, and it feels like the hand of God reaching down to you if Netflix is like, "Wow, like, we love that meme account you run, like, come to this party," or whatever, and it's like, it's as simple as that, I think. I don't know, I should run a studio.
You
That seems like a
should.
good idea.
Believe me, that's a much better plan than most of our studios are following right now. So I think yours will be a big hit. But speaking of that, we come to the great final question that's on the subject. We haven't gotten a tenth of the way through all the topics I want to bring up with you,
I
but
know, this flew by.
we'll leave people wanting more. The first rule, entertainment. There's so much to talk about. But finally, we have to close on your syllabus for Hollywood. The things that you would assign everyone who works in the entertainment industry to read, watch, consume in one way or another. All this, by the way, if Hollywood you're watching, these are required assignments. You will be tested on this, so please get it down. Delia, what would be your required consumption?
Wait, there's like little videos that I just like kind of whenever they come up, I always watch them and it just feels really like I'm really enchanted by them. One is just like the video of Kiki Palmer interviewing celebrities at the Met Gala in 2021. She was like, I think, hosting the red carpet. And it's like I feel like you don't understand how bad, like, well, I'm sure you do, but like a normal person doesn't understand how bad of a job most like red carpet hosts do until you watch Kiki Palmer and you're like, she is like an expert. Like she was born to do this. She really like makes it seem like she knows each celebrity that comes with her like personally. She'll like recall like I think she was talking to Timothy and she's like, "How's your mom?" But she's just so warm and inviting and just so like immediately, like, does the small talk, makes the talent feel comfortable and, asks them about the outfit, asks them about the night, and then sends them along their way in a very, like it's just she's so natural, she's so charismatic. I'm really shocked that she just doesn't have, like, a million, you know, giant projects lined up because I think she's incredibly talented and I think very like, she's such a great host, and she really gives off this idea of, like or this feeling of, like, she really knows all these people and she cares about all these people and is liked by all these people, and they love talking to her, and I'm just like, "Oh my god." I'm, like, such a huge fan of hers, but I think about how what a good job she did on that, and I'm really surprised they don't have her host everything. She should, like, do the Oscars. She's so great.
Hmm,
Um,
it's a good one.
the second yeah. A second one is, it's, I guess, sort of along these lines. It's, like, this feeling of, like, just genuineness. There was, like, a concert many years ago when Lady Gaga, like, noticed I think like Gaga fans will know what I'm talking about. She noticed like a young man in like an orange jacket in the crowd doing all the moves that she and her dancers were doing. So it was like clearly like a super fan. She brings him on stage and she's basically just like, "Do you know like this song?" And she's like, "Oh, sorry, I think that's my some male." I don't know if you heard that. But she brings him on stage and he does like the entire like dance number with her team. And I really like I want to believe that it was like a plant, but like from the like internet research I've done, it really seems like this was like a super fan who's noticed by Lady Gaga, came on stage and just like perfectly crushed the dance number with her. And I get so emotional when I watch that because I'm like, this is like even if I find out that this was, like he was a plant and this was a stunt, it is so, like, convincingly executed that I'm like, "This is, like, the magic that I think people are drawn to, this feeling of, like, this could happen, like, this is real, this person really loves her, and she really recognized his talent too." I'm, like, getting emotional just talking about it.
Mm,
Um,
that's
it's the song is it's like Scheisse, it's like a German name for the song, but, if you just type in Lady Gaga orange jacket kid, you'll find this video. It's like a great TikTok. Um,
fantastic.
and then my last one was just sort of I'm really enchanted by the All American Rejects was like a band I grew up really loving, and they've kind of taken advantage of like the sort of renaissance in like pop punk culture and music. And oh my god, I think they'll stop ringing. It's okay. It's some package. Um, but they came back and they're doing a tour, and for all last summer, they just did a like a string of, performances at, like, house parties in college towns, including they did one in Columbia, Missouri, at, like, a house that I've definitely, like I was like, "I've been to a party there, like, that's a good party house," you know? And I just thought that was, like, a really brilliant, like, way of going about, like, connecting with a whole new generation of fans, but also sort of, you know, I don't know that they could sell out a giant stadium now, but I think it was very cool for, I think, like, a band that's been around for a while who are sort of like, "We wanna do something that still feels very rock and roll, we wanna throw, like, a house party," and I think it got people really, really excited about them. Um, so I don't know, it's funny that I feel like the common thread in all of these is just, like, no matter how constructed these kinds of, like, you know, appearances or marketing ploys or whatever or stunts are, oh my god. I'm gonna take you guys with me as I let in a male
this
person.
this is part of our
Um,
journey together.
I know, right? But I don't know, it's like all of those things I like, there's a little bit of magic there where I'm like, "Oh, I believe. I believe that they, like, really care, that this is really happening, and it's not just an artificial, you know, thing that I'm looking at for entertainment." So, yeah, I don't know.
That's a fantastic list. And Hollywood, you have your assignments. As I said, those are required. I'll be checking out all those. Terrific. Delia Cai has been our guest. Read her book. Follow her journalism. Subscribe to the, you say it.
Deez Links,
These links
deezlink.com.
on Substack, which is fantastic. And you really like you do not if you're not reading that every day, you don't understand the internet. I'll just leave that leave that there. Within the next probably day, some horrible internet thing will happen, and would love to sit down here with you again and have you explain it to me if you don't mind. This has been a fantastic conversation,
Always.
and
Thanks for having me. Thanks for letting me ramble about stuff that I just get excited about.
no, it is fascinating, and it was much too brief. But hopefully, we will see you again soon. Everybody, follow her, subscribe to the newsletter, and we'll see you back here next week. Take care.